random for some, but special shout out to Black women. I've often been credited with, having these grand ideas of people like, oh, Trevor, you're so smart and and then I'm like, who do you think teaches me? Who do you think has shaped me, nourished me, informed me? From my mom, my my aunt, all these Black women in my life, but then in America as well. I always tell people, if you truly want to learn about America, talk to Black women. Yeah, because unlike everybody else, Black women cannot afford to and find out. Black people understand how hard it is when things go bad, especially in America, but any place where Black people exist, whether it's Brazil, whether it's South Africa, wherever it is, when things go bad, Black people know that it gets worse for them. But Black women in particular, they know what shit is, genuinely. People always be shocked. They'll be like, why do Black women turn out the way they do in America? Why do they vote the way yeah, because they know what happens if things do not go the way it should. They cannot afford to around and find out. And to Black women who have taught me, all of them, the scholars online, the authors, everybody, the Roxane Gays, the Tressie McMillan Cottons, I'll remember the names, the Zoe Tamudzis, brilliant, brilliant women have taken the time to inform me, to educate me, to argue with me, the Tarana Burks who, laughed with me, talking about everything from sexual assault to just what life is like. Yeah, man, I'll tell you now, do yourself a favor. You truly want to know what to do or how to do it, or maybe the best way or the most equitable way, talk to Black women. They're a lot of the reason that I'm here, and so I'm grateful to them. I'm grateful to every single one of you. This has been an honor. Thank you.
Welcome to my channel. This is Divested Diamonds. You have arrived. Hello, ladies. Please do me a favor and click the like button as you watch this video. Thank you. Thank you kindly. So today's video is going to be different. We're going to be diving into a space that I call the danger zone. Oh yes, the space that most content creators in this sector will not touch for fear of backlash. Now, I wouldn't blame anyone for not talking about this because, well, it's shaky ground. So those of you who are familiar with my content already know that I've talked about these topics before in the past on my old channel. Unfortunately for me, I got a ton of not so happy Black women who came to my channel to literally tell me about myself because I was, quote unquote, leading Black women down the wrong path. The funny thing is, I've only ever had Black women's best interest at heart. Being in this sector of YouTube comes at a price. I already knew this. It's very dicey, and sometimes people will like you, and other times they won't. Here's the thing. We currently have very mixed messages on what divestment is and what it's not. That being the case, we also have a lot of confused young Black women who are online behaving in ways that are unbecoming because they think divestment is all about dating out and rubbing it in other people's faces. Divestment, as I've mentioned numerous times before, has nothing to do with dating outside of your race. Divestment is a personal journey that begins and ends with you. Let me introduce myself. I'm Divested Diamonds. I've been on YouTube, not creating content since 2009. I played around with the idea of content creation in 2014, but didn't really put myself out there until 2016. When I came into this space, there were a lot of things going on. Tommy Sotomayor was on his BS. The blackmail, female haters of YouTube were in full force. As a Black female content creator, I saw what was going on and was absolutely taken aback and truly disgusted by the level of hatred being displayed by a lot of Black men. It was appalling, to say the least. As a group in this sector, we independently talked about how Black women could do better away from these males and how opening their options would be a better idea because waiting for things to improve just wasn't cutting it. Crystalline Karazin, whose channel was then called Beyond Black and White, was doing her thing with swirling. And she had her audience. When it came to my channel specifically, I talked about a variety of things, and my main concern was to help Black women get to a better place, mentally and emotionally. And a lot of other women spoke about this too. We realized that generations of women before us had not been honest about a lot of things. And that had sent a lot of Black girls and women on a downward spiral. It was time for us to start undoing a lot of the toxic teachings of our upbringing by not repeating the same toxic cycles. And so we encouraged Black women to explore their dating and marriage options and were automatically labeled as swirlers. I personally didn't care for that label, and so insisted on labeling a lot of my work as interracial dating or interracial marriage, not because I had an issue with the idea of quote unquote swirling. It was the negative connotations attached to it that I didn't care for. I'm pretty sure that Crystalline's intentions, as far as swirling was concerned, were not to turn her work into the spectacle that it became. Unfortunately, there are some things that are out of our control once we put certain ideas out there. You could be as well-intentioned as you could possibly be. You could have a vision in mind, hoping for a positive outcome, and still have your shit blown to pieces by infiltrators. Those who don't care to see you thrive, and those who live for toxicity and destruction. Sadly, some people are highly programmed to celebrate and instigate toxicity such that it's a fabric of their being. We aren't perfect as human beings, but there are certainly those who enjoy seeing others fail. People will either take an idea, run with it, improve upon it, or have it tainted by those who don't understand your vision. The same thing seems to have happened to the divestment movement/lifestyle. Just like the swirling community back then, divestment has been polluted with bad information by those who don't care about the bigger picture. The misconstruing of information is leading a lot of Black women into the danger zone. I've seen certain groups of younger women who believe that the answer to a better life is divestment by way of a white man. And I'm here to tell you that dating out without doing any work on yourself at all, as a human being, as a Black woman, isn't going to save you. Let me repeat that. If you don't do any work on yourself to better yourself and hope that dating out will save you, you are lying to yourself. Inner work is the most important part of your divestment, and not who you end up with in a relationship. While that factors into your end goal, don't make that your main priority because you will fail every single time. People also need to understand that the few content creators who were speaking on divestment back then were those who either dated outside of their race or married outside of their race. So it wasn't a group of people who had come together to get back at Black men. They had already been engaging in interracial relationships and marriage out of choice and not out of anger or a trend. Initially, there was a lot of crossover between BWE, swirling, and later divestment because we were a small group of content creators sharing similar thoughts and content, and naturally shared a lot of subscribers as well. Was it perfect? No. Sometimes there were disagreements between the ladies, all of which I'm happy to say I stayed out of. And I'm not saying this to throw anybody under the bus. I just want to make it clear that I came here to interact with a group of like-minded women, share ideas, and find ways to heal. The only person that I went back and forth with on this platform was a white European male content creator whom I felt had come into this space to take advantage of the feud between Black men and women in order to make money from the situation. When he came into this space, he claimed to like Black women, but something about him just wasn't right. He didn't come off as someone who had genuine intentions towards Black women, especially those of us in the US. And so I had a problem with that. Here's the thing. This man was from another country in Europe. He lived over there, but somehow made his way into the Black female space of YouTube. The Black women's space, right? And this guy was making money, appealing to the desperation of Black American women. So naturally, that bothered me. I did a video warning Black women about this guy. You know, just a heads up to say, hey, ladies, you need to be careful of curious samplers. Some of these men aren't interested in you like that, but will take your money and fetishize you. This person had a second channel dedicated to BBWs, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but it all came off as a fetish, and I wasn't the only one who noticed that. So in my video, I didn't mention the content creator's name. I did, however, loosely reference the title of one of his videos, and shortly after, I started getting an influx of Black women to my channel, telling me, basically, to knock it off. This man loves Black women, they said. Why are you doing this? I had women telling me that I was jealous. Of what, you ask? I will never know. I was called miserable and all kinds of derogatory names. And it was all done in a manner that seemed to suggest that I was cock blocking, right? These women actually took what I had to say as an attack on them. They took it personally. And in true mammy fashion, their first instinct was to attack the messenger, another Black woman, in protection of this man that none of them knew on a personal level. Does this behavior sound familiar? I was warning these women about the vulnerable state Black women were in, especially under the circumstances. And rather than take heed, they attacked me instead because I symbolized a dose of reality that they were not ready to hear. They couldn't handle it and didn't want to hear it. And look, I get it. Black women have been treated badly by Black men for many years. And the idea of a white man whispering sweet nothings to them in his videos gave these women new perspective. All you had to do was look at the comment section alone underneath his videos. It was embarrassing, to say the least. It was like reading porn. The lack of self-respect exhibited by some of these women was off the charts. Unbelievable. Can you say thirsty? These women were literally throwing themselves at this man without a care in the world on how that came across. You had a man who was almost 5,000 miles from the United States, living in another country, seemingly uplifting Black women, and they were just falling for it, hook, line, and sinker. And bear in mind that this man, to his own admission, had never been to the U.S. He had never been in a relationship with a Black woman at the time. And I'm sure that changed somewhere along the way if his later content was to be believed. However, he wasn't doing any of those things at the time. He did show up on my channel to tell me about myself. I mean, I was expecting that due to the number of Black women who had come to tell me that I was cock blocking. Naturally, he was upset. He accused me of being negative and clout chasing, although I didn't understand the clout chasing part because his name was not even in my title or thumbnail. It wasn't until he and I started going back and forth that I actually used his likeness in my thumbnail. Look, I'm not going to play victim here. I knew that my actions could possibly ruffle a few feathers, and that was not the reason for my warning. But I will say this, things got ugly and he got very aggressive. I'm sure that he felt that I was a threat to his income, and that was never my intention. I was just looking out for women. I was just looking out for Black women. I was just warning Black women to be careful, to be mindful of wolves in sheep's clothing. A lot of women in this space, and I'm not talking about anybody in particular, but I've always felt that encouraging Black women to date out needs to come with a disclaimer. The grass isn't always greener on the other side. And this is where it's important to emphasize vetting. Most times, people get caught up in telling you where you shouldn't be, but won't tell you how to take precautions where you're going. There are Black women in this space who are divested, but have never dated out. They would like to, but don't know how. If there is no clarity on what to look out for to prevent being fetishized or ending up in the arms of a man who might harm you the same way that a Black man would, are we really being true to ourselves? Dating out does have its benefits, especially if you're looking for marriage. Other cultures value marriage and family more than the so-called community does. With that said, we shouldn't be out here putting out falsehoods by taking interracial dating, putting it in a shiny package with a bow on top, and pretending that everything is sunshine and roses in other communities. This message is especially important to those who've never dated out. It's easy to assume that just because Blackistan has let you down, other communities won't. That's a fallacy. I think the assumption also is that just because someone calls themselves a divestor, that they will do their due diligence in making sure that they are safe and not repeating the same cycles. But such isn't always the case. And this is where honesty and transparency comes in. I mean, if you're going to be a divested woman, your divestment doesn't end once you get into a relationship. The last thing that you want is to end up in a relationship with a person of a different race who mimics the same toxicity that you have divested from. It's counterproductive. Dating out doesn't mean keeping your guard down. You still have to vet in order to make sure that the person that you end up with meets your standards, meets your needs, and meets your expectations. You must never, ever do anything based on race alone. You know, FeistyBlaq did a video recently, which I think would be of tremendous benefit to a lot of Black women, especially those who are new to this space. I'll leave the link to that video and her channel in the description bar below. Now, let me just say this. Whether or not you agree with her is irrelevant, because let me tell you something. Everything mentioned in her video is nothing but pure facts. So let's get back to the topic at hand and talk about the European man who thought he'd come into the Black woman's space, pull a fast one, hoping other Black women wouldn't notice. Despite the backlash that I got from Black women, some of them actually thanked me for pointing out that man's disingenuous intentions, because their intuition told them that as well. Women who were once subscribed to him would come to my channel to tell me that it was okay at first, but later things just started to get creepy. And of course, there were others who felt that I was ruining their opportunity to possibly being with him or other white men. It was bizarre. But anyway, the reason I'm going down memory lane and even telling you about this story is because I have a lot of new subscribers who know nothing about me. I'm not new to divestment. Matter of fact, I was there at the inception of this movement or lifestyle that has now become popular as we know it today. And our vision for this lifestyle was to never idolize men of other races, pedestalize them, or treat them like gods. The idea behind it was healing, self-love, and moving from toxic environments to better ourselves as Black women. Though the encouragement to explore one's options was there, the focus was to take care of number one, and that's you, Black women. Unfortunately, the divestment concept has been watered down and reduced to whom you sleep with, and that was not the aim of this lifestyle. I mean, sure, you can date out, you can explore your options, but all of that means nothing if you're not working on yourself. Most of us, as Black women, have childhood issues that we need to work on, abandonment issues, daddy issues, mommy issues, trauma, different types that need to be addressed before committing to any relationship. We need to learn to love ourselves and commit to ourselves first and foremost before embarking on these relationships. I think that will save a lot of Black women the trouble of repeating the same cycles. If we concentrated on our healing, we'd probably get along better too. As you already know, we don't even have a sisterhood. Moving away from toxic living situations is just the start. Divestment is a lot of work, and not everyone is capable of it. This isn't just about dating out. That's the icing on the cake. Anybody can do that. Anybody can date outside of their race. That's the easy part. And it doesn't necessarily make you a divestor. And I think that's where the confusion lies. I think that's where people get confused when they first show up in this space. Black women need to view divestment as a survival kit. Self-preservation only refers to one person, and that's you. It has nothing to do with who you date. It has nothing to do with who you sleep with. It has nothing to do with anybody else but you. And I know that some of you will not want to hear this, but in order to get to the next stage in life, you need to start on a blank canvas, which means initially it will be counterproductive for you to do it while in a relationship. Divestment is a lonely road to travel that requires focus, and it's hard to do when you are in or pursuing relationships at the same time. You can do all of that once your mind has gotten to a better place. Once you've gotten yourself to safety and finally made that decision to enjoy your new life with someone. Divestment has stages, and it all boils down to you and your well-being. Unfortunately, there are too many mixed messages in this space. Everyone thinks that they can talk divestment without any effort at all in educating themselves on what that truly means. Every time I see a Black woman deleted by a man of another race, all I have to do is go to the comment section, and there you will find comments such as, "She was a divester. That's what they get for divesting," or "That's what they get for worshiping white men." Interracial dating or swirling does not equal divestment. You can be a non-divester and still date out. This notion that divestors are worshipers of men of other races isn't true at all, especially when in reference to true divestors. Now, we know that there are a lot of internet divestors in this space. There's no doubt about that. A lot of these women talk a good game online, but their personal lives look completely different from how they portray themselves in this space. For some people, this divestment thing is just a pastime, something that they can be a part of while surfing the web. It gives them a sense of belonging, an escape from their day-to-day life. For others, it's just a way to make money, a trend that they can hop on to improve their visibility. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with being compensated for your time. I'm certainly not against that at all. I just think that if you're going to involve yourself in something this big, it should at least come from a place of genuine concern for your target audience. What happens when you run out of ideas because your heart wasn't in it? Are you going to hop on to the next trend? Real lives are being deleted, and real people need real help. Divestment is not a game. It never was. It's not an online membership that you can just cancel as and when you feel like it. It's real life. We were not joking or playing around when we started this movement. So it's really a shame to see how the definition is constantly changing to suit certain narratives. It's really a shame how certain people are watering it down because they don't care whether Black women succeed at this or not. The fundamental principles of divestment should always and will always remain the same in order for this lifestyle to work. Granted, not all Black women will divest or want to change their circumstances, and honestly, I'm okay with that. Divestment is a personal choice, and you can't force it on someone who's not ready for it. You can't force it on someone who does not want to be a part of it. It's really as simple as that. Here's a funny thing about life. You're either going to be the driver of your own existence or a passenger in someone else's. The choice is yours. Think about it this way, right? If choosing you isn't important enough, divestment isn't for you. And that's all I have to say about that. Let's move on to the second part of this video and talk about my experience with a white gentleman who stopped by my channel about 3 weeks ago. You see, I hadn't been on my channel for like a couple of days, and when I logged in, I found a bunch of comments by this guy, right? And honestly, I was pretty disturbed by what I saw. I was literally being reprimanded by this guy that I didn't even know. There was one comment specifically that I didn't care for because I found it to be ignorant, unwarranted, and disrespectful towards me, my channel, Black women, and divestment as a whole. And so I deleted it. I wish I hadn't so I could show you what was said. But anyway, moving on. There were comments made on specific videos So let's talk about that. Here's something factual about me. One thing I never do is shy away from much needed conversation, especially where clarification needs to be made. Okay, to the right-hand side, you can actually see which video he commented on. And he says, to be honest, as a white man, I'm not about this, quote unquote, zaddy worship. You do realize white men, quote unquote, built this society of bloodshed, right? Let's address that. In that specific video he's referencing, the young Black woman was basically being very delusional. It's your typical stay with Black men. White men are awful. Let's work it out. White supremacy did this and white supremacy did that. There's a moment towards the end of the video when a Black man comments on how she's ran through, as they say, and then she's put in this position where she has to defend herself and her character. Now, I didn't care enough to rewatch my video to see whether or not I had used the term quote unquote zaddy, right? But if I did, it would have been used as sarcasm. That's not a word that I would normally use in my everyday vocabulary because I don't talk like that. But anyway, to answer his question, I'm very well aware of what white men have done. I'm very aware of how this country was built and the systemic racism that still exists even today. Look, I'm not oblivious to the fact that white men have been instrumental to the suffering of Black people, not just in this country, but the world over. I've seen the effects of colonialism in Africa. I've seen how Black people are treated in Europe. I used to travel a lot. This is not new to me. I've seen the world. What I don't do, however, is paint all white men with the same brush. Now, do I think that there are racist white men out there? Absolutely. I've experienced racism as well as fetishism from white men. Even with my experiences, I don't think all white men are bad. I'm certain that you wouldn't appreciate being called racist simply because of the color of your skin, would you? Based off of what your ancestors did. So I hope that answers that question. In the second part, he says, quote unquote, Zaddy's way of hunting is different than Black men. I'm a white man and the biological son of a proud boy. Do you know that there are more broken white homes there's ever been? Do you know that white women are running away from us in droves? DV is just different in a white man's household. Quote unquote, Zaddy usually has connections to get off. Okay, let's address that. I am aware of what's going on in your community. I grew up with and around white people. I have a mixed, small circle of friends, and some of those friends are white women. What you are seeing with a lot of these white women, to my knowledge, is an awakening. The suppression of some of these women through some of those traditional practices that weak men have benefited from for centuries is now becoming a thing of the past. Matter of fact, there's an awakening when it comes to all women, period. A lot of women are no longer okay being used as tools to further the agenda of controlling abusive men. It's a sign of the times. Things are changing, and women are no longer okay staying silent as they continue to be hurt. And yes, in cases where these women get unalived, a lot of times some of these men in your community will get away with it because they are the dominant ones in society. And like you said, they have connections. I'm very much aware of that. And the conversation continues. In my community tab, I made a post on Kentucky Fried Karen. You know who I'm talking about. And this is what he had to say underneath that post. I gotta stay silent on this. I'm sorry. Shouldn't she be released like Courtney Clenny? This is from a white man, by the way. And my response to him was, why do you believe she deserves to be released? Her parents bailed her out, but I'm curious as to why you feel she's devoid of consequences. Please explain. And his response was, at Divested Diamonds, I never said she deserves to be released, but you all want to free Courtney Clenny. So if Courtney should be freed, shouldn't she be freed as well? And my response to him was, you all? LOL. I don't care either way. However, you would have to understand the true reasons as to why some Black women feel this way for it to make sense. There are layers to this. It's not that simple. I neither agree nor disagree with how most Black women feel regarding this situation because I know and understand the plight of Black women as a Black woman myself. And honestly, let me just speak on this a little further. First of all, when you come into a space ill-equipped and ill-advised, this is what happens. Anytime someone says you all to another group of people, that shows a very high level of ignorance. Him saying that made me realize that he either had a bone to pick with me personally, or he had an issue with Black women in general or divestors, but didn't really do his research when it came to the lifestyle. When he came to my channel and saw Divested in the channel name, his mind automatically, I'm sure, made him believe that we're all the same in this space. He came to my channel with a preconceived notion he was judging me. And there was no doubt in my mind that he thought of divestors in general as unintelligent, intellectually lazy, and lackluster and lame. Was this supposed to hurt my feelings? One thing I would never do is confidently comment on something I have no understanding of. I don't like egg on my face because as someone who's always seeking knowledge, I would rather ask when in doubt than put an entire foot in my mouth. There is nothing cute or attractive about willful ignorance. I'm sure he's watched other quote-unquote divestors channels and probably heard them say, free Courtney Clenny. And I suppose he came to my channel thinking that I shared the same views as well. I've never done a video dedicated to Courtney Clenny and Toby Abumseli. I've made references to that situation, but you won't find one video dedicated to them. And since he brought it up, let's talk about it. Let's talk about why I haven't done a video dedicated to those two. Quite simply, I don't care. I don't care what Black men get up to. As long as Black women aren't being hurt by them, I don't give a rat's ass what they do. I've never had an issue with Black men who date outside of their race. That doesn't bother me at all. It's not my business. The reason a lot of Black women stayed out of that situation with Toby and Courtney was because he said a lot of disrespectful things about Black women while dating out. Highly inflammatory things about women who share his skin tone. A lot of Black men do this, and I'll prove that to you later in this video. Meanwhile, he was in this abusive relationship with a woman who very clearly didn't even like him. In a video that you can find anywhere online, including here on YouTube, she can be heard yelling at him, talking down to him, and at some point calls him the N-word. And do you know what he does? He submits to her dominance like the same B-word that these males like to call Black women. Do you know why this self-hating Black male would do that? Because his self-hatred made him believe that her white skin was worth the humiliation. Black men will do anything just to say they've been with a white woman. Black men look at white women as an upgrade. They use white skin as currency. Being in close proximity to a white woman makes them believe that they have accomplished something. Most of them interracially date or marry for the wrong reasons. Their biracial children are on TikTok every day, spilling the tea about their parents' interracial coupling and how toxic a lot of these unions are. Take a look at this.
So you know how we be kikiing that there's a difference between white mama biracials and black mama biracials, right? This is an actual sociological phenomenon that I really think we could trace back to slavery. Stay with me. So back in the day, the child would take on the status of the mother, which means that no matter how much blackness you had in you, if your mama was a slave, your mama could have been a mulatto, a quadroon, a full black woman. If she was a slave, you would therefore be a slave. So you had children who had white slave-owning daddies, but were being raised, the labor of raising was on their black enslaved mothers. And whether or not we want to admit it, culture came out of slavery, right? So not only were these children taking on the status of being enslaved, they were taking on the whole culture of being enslaved. They were taking on norms, music, language, etc. They were seeing themselves as black people, regardless of their genetic makeup. And their black enslaved mothers had to navigate that with them. They had to raise them through that. And white men were able to continue procreating these biracial children with no consequence. So much so that there were laws saying you couldn't technically grape a black enslaved woman because black enslaved women were naturally promiscuous. But on the flip side, black enslaved men weren't really having kids with white women like that. They literally would be caught dead if they did. White women would still sexually assault them, or if there was a sexual relationship, the black men would just be accused of assault if they got caught. And we've seen that play out for decades. So by the time that interracial relations became legal, there had been centuries of white men being able to grape impregnate black women, and black women having to raise those children as their own and embed them within slave culture and black culture. But black men never had to do that same type of labor. If anything, black men actually being able to legally be with white women was a way for them to remove themselves from their blackness. Coveting a white woman became a form of like a revolutionary act, because then you're coveting the white man's woman. This literally explains so much, because black men, in the context of interracial relations, black men never had to have the labor of having a biracial child and yet still having to explain and raise that child in the status of your own, having to explain to this child their blackness, having to explain why the world sees them this way, why they're being treated this way, helping them navigate their experience in blackness. So then if you throw in on top of that the weird exploitative nature of black men and white women being together in a relationship, where white women have always sexualized black men, and now black men are like, white man, we can legally cover your woman. Who is teaching their child about blackness? About black culture? Who? The white woman for sure don't care. Okay, we see white women cry on this app every fucking day about, oh my god, my biracial child realized they're black. And then black men, I mean, you've never really had to navigate that situation for centuries like black women have. So again, who is telling this child about their blackness?
As a biracial child of this combination of the black man, white woman combo, girl, I cannot agree more. So the issue is, when these black men are getting to know their potential white partner, deciding to have kids, they're not having conversations about creating a racial consciousness, because that's not the goal of the relationship. The goal of the relationship is for that man to have that sense of power from diluting his blackness. And transparently, this is something my father has told me. He's actually felt a sense of pride of walking through the mall and people knowing his child is light-skinned. So heavy pause. So if the goal of that black man is finding someone who will let him carry this sort of like fantasy out of diluting his blackness, do you really think he's having a conversation with his white partner about what it's going to mean to raise black children? That child is only going to find their connection to their blackness through them seeking it out on their own.
Back to Toby. His lack of direction in life had him stay in that relationship because he had to keep up appearances on social media. It turns out he wasn't the one making the money in that relationship. She was. He was using her for a place to stay. That is why he acted like a bootlicking field Negro with no self-worth. I'll tell you what else he didn't want to do. He didn't want to dismantle the fake image that he had built for himself online. You see, even when they're dusty, with no pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of, their hatred for the womb from which they come is always on full display. It doesn't matter if they're Black American or Black African. They carry the same disdain for Black women, but especially Black American women. This is why when he got toe tagged and sent to another dimension, Black women across the United States chose not to get involved, including those who march for everything that these Black males get themselves into. They sat the fuck down and didn't care about Toby Obumseli. There are videos out there of his toxic relationship. Personally, his toxic ways came back to haunt him. And if you expect me to care, you're barking up the wrong tree. I give 0 fucks plus a middle finger to people like him. And as far as Courtney Clenny is concerned, I don't care what happens to her either way. She's not my concern. And on that note, let's move on. So the conversation continues, and this is what he had to say. I'm against the harm white women have caused in any relationship, especially when it comes to DV. I never said I supported this girl's actions in any way, but I also don't approve of the actions of Courtney Clenny being solely responsible, not just for murder, but being fully guilty of DV and Christian being the victim of it. Just like white men have killed Black women and gotten away with it as well due to privilege and connections, I'm a white man, and there are more broken homes over here as well than there's ever been. I'm the biological son of a Proud Boy family, so I know the harm white men and white women do and have done since the beginning of time, and don't appreciate that being glossed over and supported due to hatred of a demographic in society. You have to excuse me. The grammar and punctuation leaves much to be desired. But anyway, let's continue. He says, there's been Black women that have done bad things too. Have you heard of Sharon Carr? She brutally stabbed a woman to death in England, got away with it again, and stabbed another girl years later. Do I hold malice to your demographic for that? Of course not. She does not represent every woman. Is there a Black man that can't let go of the hood and change? Sure. But there are Black men that I know in my life who are single fathers raising their kids. There are Black men letting go of the hood and the gangbangers who don't want to shape up and make a change. There are good Black men out there, as well as good Black women. There are bad white men out there, as well as equally bad white women. I don't support what Courtney or this girl did. I'm just exercising my right to, quote unquote, remain silent on this matter due to the not true things spoken on Christian's name, like him being an abuser, when the evidence shows otherwise. I don't condone his racism by any means, but I don't approve of falsehoods being spread on his name by divested Black women that aren't true. I'm a white man, and I don't appreciate the overglorification, fetishization of white men and being looked at as a bag of money as well. Okay, there are 3 things I'd like to talk about before I get into my response. I would like to address this part where he says, I never said I supported this girl's actions in any way, but I also don't approve the actions of Courtney Clenny being solely responsible, not just for murder, but for being fully guilty of DV, and Christian, aka Toby, being the victim of it. See, I want you to pay attention here. This is what loyalty looks like. Even though this woman murdered her boyfriend, this man who happens to be someone from her community, sides with her, even though she took someone's life. Do I need to say allegedly here? Okay, allegedly. He is being protective over this woman, even under the circumstances. But I'll leave you to ponder on that. The second thing that I wanted to point out was this. He says, I'm the biological son of a Proud Boy family, so I know the harm white men and white women do and have done since the beginning of time, and don't appreciate that being glossed over and supported due to hatred of a demographic in society. There's been Black women that have done bad things too. Have you heard of Sharon Carr? Sharon is actually spelt with one R, not two. Sorry, pet peeve. She actually stabbed a woman to death in England, got away with it again, and stabbed another girl years later. Do I hold malice to your demographic for that? Of course not. She doesn't represent every woman. Okay, let's analyze this. What I'm getting here is that he is addressing me, obviously, right? Plus other Black women who are divestors. He's under the impression that somehow, even though we know about some of the atrocities his people have committed, we don't care to address those issues and choose willful ignorance. We would rather turn a blind eye to the atrocities, revel in them, celebrate them, and support them like a bunch of idiots because we hate Black men so much. We basically use our hatred against Black men to spite them and bear no accountability. It's very interesting how someone would hold such views when they have never lived a day in their life as a Black woman. Sir, I don't know what you've seen or whom it is that you've talked to, but sometimes I do find that when people overstep their boundaries, when they go into unknown territory, it's easy to continuously shove that foot down their throat. You know, it always amazes me how everybody gets to speak on behalf of Black women and tell us how we should or should not act, what we should or should not say, all the while not understanding the plight of Black women. Most people, yourself included, do not understand who we are, yet here you are giving endless advice to Black women. The same Black men that you're championing for are the same ones who've made Black women's lives extremely difficult, extremely miserable. They are deleting Black women on a constant basis, but no, we're not allowed to have a dislike for people like that. When you come into a space such as this one, talking about Black women taking accountability, you should also know that nothing holds a Black woman more accountable than divestment. But of course, you don't know that because you do not know what divestment is. And just to answer your question, I do know who Sharon Carr is. And your desperate need to try and prove how degenerate Black women can be had you unearth a story of a mentally ill killer named Sharon Carr to prove what exactly? That Black women aren't perfect? Nobody said we were. We've never claimed perfection at all. When we talk about our issues, the only thing we're doing is raising awareness. Because in the grand scheme of things, nobody else besides a few Black women cares about Black women. The story of Sharon Carr was also an isolated incident. Yes, Black women can sometimes do heinous things, but obviously you feel that we're all the same the world over. Phrases such as "you all" and giving an example of a crime that took place in another country shows the kind of mentality you have. Your contradictory, weak argument had you grasping at straws here. There are a lot of Black women who grow up in dangerous conditions, such as sharing cars, but they don't have an inherent need to want to off everybody. Clearly, something was off balance with her. She wasn't properly aligned. I know some of the things you said were an attempt to try and appear fair and balanced, but you still have a lot to learn. What Sharon Carr did was unforgivable. I'm not making excuses for her, but what was the point of that? What exactly were you trying to prove? And look, even if you were to dislike Black women in general, none of us would lose sleep over it. You wouldn't be the first or the last person to show disdain. Sadly, we're used to others being hateful, even when we're minding our own business. It's nothing new. Bringing up all these scenarios to try and shame us into seeing our faults just proves how little you understand about Black women. And just because you know one or two Black men who are single fathers does not mean that you understand the plight of Black women as it pertains to Black men. You have no clue. Do you know why I incorporated that clip of Trevor Noah at the beginning of this video? I'll tell you why. He gets it. He understands because he saw what his Black mother went through in racist South Africa. He's actually one of the few who gets it. I've known about Trevor Noah for years now, before The Daily Show. One thing he's remained consistent on is respect for his mother. And I think that what it was, and this is just my opinion, right? When he came to the US and actually lived here, he saw a mirror image of how he grew up in terms of the treatment Black women were exposed to in his country and how Black women are treated here in the United States. Because again, people have to understand that South Africa and the United States are very similar in many ways as far as race relations are concerned. So when he talked about asking Black women or talking to Black women, he was saying, in my opinion, that if anyone understands how the system works and the impact it's had on its people, we get it because we bear the brunt of a lot of the blowback. That is why, in a lot of cases, we can't afford to F around and find out because most things don't fall in our favor. We literally have to fight for everything. That being the case, we have knowledge on how the system works through our experiences. And look, he's allowed to talk about it. He can speak on it because he comes from the womb of a Black woman. What is going on between Black men and Black women is something that's been brewing for a while now. You have no idea what Black women's experiences are or what we've been through. And no one's overlooking what your people have done and continue to do. I'm aware of what's going on in the Marshall Islands and the plans to keep Africa poor. We're not all clueless, white-worshiping Black women. At least I'm not. Do you know who Irish politician Claire Daly is? Look her up and listen to what she had to say on the insidious relationship between Europe, the US, China, and the Horn of Africa, and what your people are doing over there. How about the Italian politician, Giorgia Meloni? Look her up and see what she had to say about France and the rest of Europe and their relationship with Africa. Listen, while you have the right to feel as you do, based on your interpretation of the things you've seen, I can't help but gasp at the audacity of you, thinking that we're all out here kissing white men's feet and worshiping the ground that they walk on. Imagine that. I couldn't think of anything worse. And that goes for every other race of man. I don't care who you are. Kissing ass is something I don't do. The last thing that I wanted to address was this. I don't support what Courtney or this girl did. I'm just exercising my right to, quote unquote, remain silent on this matter due to the not true things spoken on Christian's name. I'll stop there. For someone who is exercising their right to, quote unquote, remain silent, you really do have a lot to say. There are more opinions than silence here, quite clearly. And let's take a look at something else you said. I'm a white man and don't appreciate the overglorification, fetishization of white men and being looked at as a bag of money as well. You know, I was intrigued as to which part of my content would make him feel this way. But then, after realizing that he didn't even watch majority of my videos, I came to the conclusion that perhaps he was just triggered by the term divested. Because if he scrolled back a few videos, he would have found this video right here. He must have missed that. But anyway, let me make something crystal clear. I'm not in the business of kissing ass. I'm not in the habit of spreading cheeks and kissing the road within. I don't fetishize anyone, nor have I ever. I'm not mesmerized by anybody's skin, and to suggest otherwise is an insult to my intelligence. Paying a compliment to a group of people for staying on top as long as they have is not worshiping them. Please stop flattering yourselves and thinking that you are God's gift to Black women. And to the Black women who keep embarrassing themselves and making us all look bad, this is really what they think of you. Like I said earlier, I don't believe all white men behave or think this way, but we can't sit here and pretend that this doesn't happen, because it does. Let's take a look at the following.
This random guy on Twitter decided to take this picture of me, put this filter on top of my face to make me look like a man, and then use me in a side-by-side comparison with Kylie Jenner, basically saying that white women are the beauty standard and Black girls will never be as pretty as them because we're manly, and they're all in the comments laughing and calling me a gorilla. Society has this really weird obsession with stripping the femininity away from Black women. They do this with Megan Thee Stallion, Michelle Obama, Serena Williams. We're constantly getting compared to men. We don't get to be soft and feminine and dainty. We're mean, we're aggressive, we're loud, we're violent. It's so weird. And this is what I'm talking about when I say that the misogyny that white women face is nothing compared to Black women's. And I can't even express how this actually makes me feel, or else I'll be the angry Black woman. I'm going to be the one who's making everything about race. I'm going to be the one who's reaching.
All right, look, I'm sure this is going to get me into trouble, but I want to hear everybody's opinion on this. And please understand, I realize I'm making this observation as a white dude. That's why I want to hear everybody else's opinion. So she says that society is stripping away the femininity of Black women. However, throughout my life, I've met very few feminine Black women. Like seriously, when I think about all the women I've encountered in my life, and I think specifically about the Black ones, I can honestly say that there's only been 1 or 2 instances where they've been feminine. The vast majority of Black women I've encountered have been brusque and aggressive. And even though a ton of them have been absolutely fucking gorgeous, they were significantly more masculine than they were feminine. In the way they acted, not the way they looked. So my question is, do you think it's society doing it? Or is it just the behaviors of Black women in society today?
The vast majority of Black women I've encountered have been brusque and aggressive. Now, ordinarily, after listening to such demeaning trash, I would have said, okay, well, I guess that's been his experience, right? If that's how he feels, there's no need to waste one's time trying to debunk this foolishness. On the other hand, my curiosity would be, is it just Black women that he feels this way about? Or does he feel the same way about women his own race? Would he give a fair assessment in calling out this quote-unquote masculinity if it were on a white woman? The answer to that is no, he wouldn't. A lot of these problematic white men never speak badly about their own women because, well, loyalty. And they understand which side their bread is buttered, because there's another video of his where a white woman says to him, most white women down here, wherever that is, can drive tractors and wrestle hogs. And his response to that is,
But see, believe it or not, most men wouldn't view that as masculine. See, I think that's a misconception that women think. Y'all think driving tractors, wrestling hogs, going mudding, you think guys would view that as masculine. We absolutely don't. Girls that do that shit are just as feminine as the girls that like to wear dresses and go to brunch. When I say women acting masculine, I mean the way in which they talk to you. Their general demeanor. Because I've dated Southern Belles. And I've dated girls who probably could have been a ranch hand on Yellowstone. They both seemed very feminine to me. And their activities had nothing to do with it. It was just something about the way they talked, their attitude, the way they acted. Still came across as feminine. Even when they were covered in mud from head to toe, holding a 30-06 trying to shoot something. Shit still came across as feminine. But I've met women in bars with nails, makeup, and hair perfectly done that came across masculine as fuck. It's not the activities, it's the attitude.
what this lady up here mentioned is normally associated with men. Women who engage in such activities are normally labeled butch or manly. So that's a lie. The issue here is that there's money and clout in the business of humiliating Black women. This has been happening for years, long before social media. And please pay attention to the nice, nasty words that are incorporated in their insults. And this is what they do, right? They would normally pay you a compliment before going in for the kill. And this is why I cringe when I see Black women in these people's comment section saying things like, well, he's right. We need to do better. And then proceed to ask if he has a brother. Do we not hear the underlying message laced with all that bitter candy? The fact that he thinks a white woman who would do what's considered stereotypically male is feminine, but proceeds to call a nicely presented Black woman as masculine for being assertive in her speech says a lot.
We're not on the wrong side of TikTok. Okay.
Why don't you mind the problems of white women?
And what problem would that be? Dealing with all the attention they get from successful white and Black men? And it ain't racist to point out the reality. Successful Black men, they go and get themselves a white woman. A feminine, submissive white woman. One who wants to focus on taking care of her man. Not, as you said, get their bag. Because one thing is true for white and Black men. Neither of us are turned on by you getting your bag. But that's fine. You go ahead and get yours. Make all the money you can and be set for life. You're going to need it. Because the type of men that are sticking around for women like that, yeah, they're going to need to be taken care of. They're going to need somebody to pay their living expenses. Because all the successful Black men went and found themselves a white girl. But you go ahead and get your bag and pick from the ones that are left over. The ones the white girls threw back. Be mad if you want to. Doesn't change the reality one bit.
I didn't think it was possible to cram that much racism and misogyny in like 40 seconds, but he did it. You know, he did it. But what was really funny is the fact that he said this.
Submissive white woman. One who wants to focus on taking care of her man. Not, as you said, get their bag.
So these submissive white women are going to take care of their men instead of getting their bag. But what was it you said about the women that focus on getting their bag?
It's fine. You go ahead and get yours. Make all the money you can and be set for life. You're going to need it. Because the type of men that are sticking around for women like that, yeah, they're going to need to be taken care of.
According to you, no matter what type of woman we're discussing, the man will always be useless and need taken care of. Noted.
On that note, I'm going to end this video here. I'll be back with part 2 because there's more conversation to be had. And also, I used a couple of clips from Jenny O's channel. She's a content creator right here on YouTube. I'll leave the link to her channel and that particular video in the description bar below. And I want Black women to know that the reason I'm doing these videos is not to deter you from dating out. We need to start having open and honest conversations about some of these other races of men and calling out their bad behavior. We don't tolerate dusty, musty, crusty behavior from men who look like us. Why would we tolerate this from other people? I'll see you in part 2. Thank you so much for watching. This is Divested Diamonds, and I'll see you in the next one.